Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another recent reads on Sunday. My twice a month, I think it's going to be now, a video in which I discuss the books that I've just finished or am still reading or am about to start. I have 3 books that I want to talk to you about that I've finished, 2 books that I'm still working on or just started, and then there are a couple of books, I think 2, that I want to read next week. Anyway, let's just start. I'm a bit frazzled today. I didn't sleep that well for no particular reason. Anyway, the first book I want to talk to you about, I finished that one actually, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe. It was still in July because it's this one, The Flamethrowers by Rachel Kushner, first published in 2013. I always think this book is older, but that's because it's set in 1975. Anyway, this is one of the books from my 1001 books by women that I want to read, and it's also on Sandy's list. Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, and we picked this one for her book club, where she picks 10 books, no book in January, no book in August, 10 books to read from her list. And this year I'm co-hosting. You probably missed that because I was a crappy co-host. I said that multiple times already. But anyway, in July, I managed to actually read the book that I was supposed to. And then August is a month off because Sandy's going camping. And then we resume in September. And if you're interested in the list, you find that below in the description box. Anyway, so this is Rachel Kushner's second book. Set in 1975, main character is a young woman, Reno, in her 20s. Reno is a nickname because that's where she comes from, the city, Reno, and she comes to New York. I was just, for some reason, all of a sudden thought it was Los Angeles, but no, it's New York, and she wants to, do art. She's also very interested in motorcycles. There's a lot in this book about motorcycles and certain companies that make motorcycles. And then she also goes to Italy. It didn't work for me. I was not surprised because I tried Mars Room by Rachel Kushner and that didn't work for me either at all. So I was not really surprised that this story, it just didn't engage me. It was, I don't know, too much, even though I thought it was interesting that Reno then goes to Europe, to Italy, and we learn something about the Brigade Rosso, the left-wing militant organization / terror organization, depending on your point of view, in Italy in the 1970s. We also learn about Italian society, but for some reason, it was just too much. It was as if Reno was not part of the story, even though she was the main character. It was like she was just, things happened to her and she looked at stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was on my 1001 list and I'm happy I read it, but I now know for sure that Rachel Kushner is just not the author for me. So this was the first or the last book in July, I think, that I finished. And then, the next one, it's also an end of July book. It was a birthday present, The Extinction of Irena Ray by Jennifer Croft, published earlier this year. And this was gifted to me by Kim from Middle of the Book March. She gifted me 2 books, and this was one of them for my birthday. I mean, my birthday was in July, in case you missed it. And I had this on my want to have list because I was interested in Jennifer Croft. This is her second novel, I think, or third novel, but I only knew her as a translator. She translates Olga Tokarczuk as an example, and I really, really liked her translation. And the premise of this book completely intrigued me because it is about translation. And I'm always fascinated by books about language, about writing, about translation. So the premise of the book is there is this really, really famous Polish author, Irena Ray. It's not Tokarczuk, but could be. And you have 8 translators from all over the world who always come to her place somewhere in the woods, as you can see, to translate her newest book together. And this is how the book starts. So 8 translators in the beginning only refer to, in terms of the language they translate to, gather at her house. What makes this book twisty also is that The Extinction of Irena Ray, is actually a novel by one of the translators, the Spanish translator, a female, and is translated into English by the English translator that we meet in the book. So there are these various levels, and the English translator will also comment on his translation in footnotes. So that I thought that was fascinating. When these 8 translators arrive, they have dinner with Irena, and the next day, this is not a spoiler, this happens really right at the beginning, Irena disappears. She just vanishes. And then plot takes off from there. It worked for me only partially, I have to say. I thought the premise was really fascinating. I loved the writing. I loved the stuff about translation and the relationship between translators in various languages, but also between the translator and the author. But the story was at times I felt a bit, it went all over the place. So I liked it. I definitely very, very much like parts of it, but I did not love it as a story, as the plot as such. So it's certainly interesting if you are, like me, interested in that whole language thing, but I felt that the plot was dragging a bit, even though it's not that long of a book. It's not even 400 pages, I think. It's just under 300 pages, so it's not an extremely long book. And still, I felt the plot dragged a bit, but the ending was good though. And then a book that I actually finished in August. I also finished 2 other books in August, nonfiction books, but those were for the Booktube Prize. In the final rounds we are now, and the winner is announced beginning of October, so I'm not going to talk about those. But I also finished this one. Just this weekend, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhorn, published in 2023. This was also a birthday gift from Heidi from my reading life, and we read it together as a buddy read. This is historical fiction set in 1789 with flashbacks to 1750-ish. So it covers the time, the period between mid 18th century until 1789-ish. And it's set in Maine. This was in Hallowell, Maine. So this was already, I really got a kick out of that, because the little town that is, of course, in 1789, and we'll see whether I can find the map. Yes, here, Hallowell. Can you see that? I'm not very good at this. So Hallowell, and of course Heidi lives in Maine, and her main office is in this town. So I got a kick out of that, a fact that I read this book with somebody who actually more or less lives there. And of course, in 1789, there were not many people. It was a village, a very, very small village. Anyway, but what made this book fantastic and interesting, because I really, really like this one, was that it is about Martha Ballard, a midwife. And she was an actual person. She lived in that village and she was a midwife. And she kept a diary, a day book rather, for almost 30 years. And which is very, very unusual for a woman at that time. And so Ariel Lawhon weaves a story around Martha Ballard. She inserts a mystery. A dead body is found, murdered probably, and Martha investigates. But the mystery, for me, was not the most interesting part at all. To be honest, the most interesting part was the life of Martha. And a lot of it, the author takes from the diaries. There are also diary entries in the book that are actually authentic diary entries. But of course, she weaves a story around that, about her life and her marriage and her children. But it's so fascinating, the life of this midwife in 1789 and the position of women and the some legal aspects, because there is also a court case. You really learn a lot about the life in the colonies in 1789 in Maine, and I loved it. It was engaging. It was fast paced. It was a real success for me. So yeah, thank you, Kim and Heidi, for giving me all those fantastic books. Then I just want to mention very briefly that I'm still working on The White Album by Joan Didion. There goes the pen. I'm reading this with Terri from Miss Terri Reads. We are in the last third, but I'm a bit behind, so I have to do my best to catch up now, because I think we're going to check in today or tomorrow. But it's still fascinating. The essays, Joan Didion is such an excellent, I don't know, I have kind of, my hair is all over the place. Anyway, sorry about that. Those are all from the late 1960s, early 1970s. But she has such a power of observation and putting it in sentences. It's absolutely amazing. And then I just started a book last week, a buddy read with Joe Smith, Women in Translation Month. So we picked up a translated book, Joy Saumon, Tenderloin, translated from the French by Lara Vergniaud. And this is a weird little book. We had just had our first check-in on Saturday. It's a small book by independent press, Restless Books. And we read, Joe and I read another Joy Saumon together, Life Sciences, about the curse of a century-long curse affecting females in a certain family, and they give them weird afflictions. And the main character in Life Sciences has this painful burning sensations on her arms, from her wrist to her shoulders. So it's very body centered, and this is no different. This is an earlier book by the author, even though the English translation was just published this year. So this is a new book from our perspective, the English perspective, but the French book has been published in 2012. So before Life Sciences, the book we read before. So the main character is Pim, and he's a butcher. And I would say, well, Joe is a vegetarian, but if you're vegetarian, I don't know whether you will enjoy this book, because we are now halfway through, and it's not much has happened yet, but there is this very detailed description about what happens to animals. So from the cow on pasture to the abattoir, slaughterhouse, transportation, coming to the butcher. Yeah, it's not enjoyable. At least it wasn't for me. Where the story will go, I have no idea, because so far nothing happens. Pim is 16 when he starts. He has 2 years of apprenticeship, and he is really, really good at it as a butcher. But where this goes, we'll see. I will report back. We have our final check-in beginning next week, so I will report back whether anything happens next time. And then I have 2 books that I want to read, both of which are translated works. The first one is this, Maya Lunde, The Last Wild Horses, and thank you for putting the translator on the cover, translated from the Norwegian by Diane Oatley. This is the 3rd one in Maya Lunde's Climate Quartet. And it's a reread for me, but it's on the Book Naturalist book list for August, Women in Translation. And it's about climate change, of course, climate quartets. And in this particular book, she talks about a certain breed of horses. I forgot the name of that breed that was endangered. And as it's usual for Maya Lunde, if you know her work, her first one is The Bees. It happens in varied time frames. So in the past, then in the almost present, and this one is set in the future. The last one is set in the future, 2064, when the climate catastrophe has already happened. So I want to pick up this one. And then I also want to pick up the classic that I want to read, that is on my list. You find that below, for July and August, and that is The House of Ulloa. I will show it to you, but I have to look up the translator. Translated by Paul O'Prey and Lucia Graves. This is a Galician author, Emilia Pardo Bazan, and The House of Ulloa was one of my pick of the 6 classics I want to read in 2024, which I got waylaid a little bit because of my break. But this is the classic for July and August, and I will certainly read it in August. It's about one of the greatest 19th century Spanish novel. Is about Father Julian Alvarez, who is sent to a remote country estate to put the affairs of the Marquis, an irresponsible libertine, in order. So that's the premise, and I will definitely read this also in August. So these were my recent reads, current reads, future reads. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, leave a comment. I'm very much looking forward to that. And I will see you all soon in the next one, next Sunday.